All right, I think we'll get started here. So thanks everyone for joining. My name's Steve McMahon. I'm a senior manager from Accenture out of our Boston office in our communications and high-tech practice. Here today with my client from EMC, Darren Sullivan from the Business Technology Group, and Carolyn Ross from the Business Technology Group as well, and Brian Baruman, who's from our SaaS practice and has been at EMC for about a year or so. So I know we're standing in the way of lunch, which is always a tough way to start, but the safe harbor statement is listed here, which is Salesforce's spiel, which you heard from Mark today. And so I'm just going to kick it off, give a brief introduction. Like I said, we're excited to be here today. EMC has been a long-standing client of ours, and over the past year and a half, we've been embarking on different Salesforce.com initiatives. My role is program manager across the Accenture resources that we have both onshore and offshore. EMC, made a significant investment, and Darren will hit on that for a 7,500 user base deployment that is full functionality of SFA, CRM, as well as integrations into their Oracle systems. As we started to deploy this throughout the year, we noticed some of the traditional change management mechanisms proved challenging. The field, despite using the best CRM tool, around the globe, the sales users are still the sales users. And what we're going to explain to you today is some tips and tricks that we've developed at EMC that it helps transform the business as well as drive user adoption. As we started to face those challenges, we changed the way our team structure was, and we really spent a lot of time. We worried about the upfront design, but also really focused on post-deployment, driving the change with the business, because you could turn on the system and you'd get usage, but to really get the true value and return on investment that EMC is looking for, we had to drive the change with the field. So what we're going to walk through today is how we're doing that. And Darren will lay the context in detail of the challenges, and Brian and Carolyn will then hit on some of the tips and tricks like I spoke about. So with that, I'll introduce Darren.
Great, thank you. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce who we are as a company. For those that don't know EMC, we're the world's leading provider of information infrastructure, technology, and solutions. Many of you probably know us for our storage products, which is still an integral part of our portfolio. But over the last several years, we've broadened our portfolio of products and services to include content management and archiving, security, virtualization, backup recovery systems. So we have a broad offering, and we're a global company. We're a $14–15 billion company with over 40,000 employees operating in countries around the world. So in terms of our deployment of Salesforce.com, it's a global deployment, and we'll go through the phasing and how we've gone about the deployment in a couple of minutes. But it is across our major theaters. About 7,000 users, as Steve mentioned, are on the solution or about to be on the solution as part of our rollout. And we took an aggressive approach to drive this out, and I'll talk about the context that set the stage for that rollout. But we did it in a phased manner, and we'll talk about why we did that and the lessons learned that we got from that approach. And we have a fairly complex selling environment. We've got multiple acquisitions over the last few years that brought different selling methodologies, selling models, different products and services that we've needed to build a CRM solution that accommodates those requirements. And we have both an indirect and a direct channel model. So we have complexities in terms of managing across the two of those. Plus, we have a matrix selling environment. For those that have large selling organizations here, we have our main direct sales organization, but we have large organizations that cut across those direct selling organizations that need to be able to run their business as a product specialist, so to speak, but at the same time be able to collaborate and interact with the direct sales teams. So all of this paints a picture in terms of what we've done in terms of this particular rollout. So in terms of what set the stage for why we did this. Now, we had a CRM solution, but the thing that we heard from the field over and over again, that it wasn't really a true CRM solution. We essentially had a system that we tracked opportunities to roll up a forecast, but didn't provide a lot of the key functionality that a rep needs to be able to run their business around account intelligence and activities and interactions and so forth. So we didn't really deliver a solution to this point that provided those. And as a result, key customer information that is in the heads and in the spreadsheets and in the contact files for our sales reps walks out the door. And it's a challenge that we all have, that you want to keep that intelligence in the company and build on it. And as you're changing territories or you have turnover that's expected, you want to be able to ramp up new reps as quickly as possible and not lose that information and have to rebuild it. And as a result and related to that, we've got data in a bunch of different places, spreadsheets, offline trackers, and so forth. So in terms of the opportunity that was presented for us with this, we needed to provide that solution that the field had been asking for 4 years, to provide them with ability to collaborate, ability to track information that they need as part of their daily jobs, and also allow us as a company to improve the way we do business as a selling organization. So we're taking this opportunity with this program. Although it's a technology implementation, it's also a significant business transformation effort that we're undergoing as well, and it's tied directly in with our go-to-market strategy. And we've aggressively been changing our go-to-market approach at a strategic level, and this program has been great in that it has been part and parcel with that strategy. So it's not like we've got a selling strategy and then we've got this SFA implementation. It really has been tied at the hip with what we've been trying to do as an organization. So it's giving us an opportunity to run our organization as a selling team better than we have in the past, using the tool as the platform to do that. And one thing I want to underscore is that to give you an idea of the importance of this initiative for our company, we had initially done a pilot in inside sales with a few hundred users last year. And the thought was that we might expand that over this year gradually and slowly roll it out. But our CIO, we changed CIOs last year, in October of last year. And the new CIO, Sanjay Mirchandani, in partnership with our sales executives, said, let's not do that. Let's take a run at this for real and aggressively roll it out worldwide. Signed a major agreement with Salesforce.com in the January timeframe in the depths of the economic crisis. So it gives you a sense of what we were trying to do as a company, even though we were being very, very tight with expense management and other investments. This one was the thing that we made a bet on, with the idea that if we could get in and out of this deployment this year and the economic recovery would start next year, that we would be able to springboard off of that and really drive growth in the organization. So just wanted to give you a sense of what this meant to us as a company. This was more than just a rollout of a tool. It was a strategic effort. So when I mentioned earlier that we took an aggressive but phased approach, before we started the larger rollout, we spent time with partners at Cisco and Dell and other companies to just get a sense from them, the lessons learned that they had from their implementation, so that we could build it into our plan. And the thing that we heard over and over again was, don't try to do this in a big bang approach. Do it gradually, do it iteratively, learn from it, and plan for that kind of phased approach, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get the return that you're looking for. So we embarked on a multi-quarter effort starting in Q2. We have a calendar year fiscal cycle. So Q2 of this year, with about 5 releases, with a combination of capabilities and audience. So it's almost like we had 2 parallel paths of each additional release brought more people on and brought more capabilities on. Our opportunity management piece had to go last because it was our prior system was an on-premises solution that was fully integrated with reporting infrastructure and other applications. And so to decouple that was the more complex side of it. So we decided to push that out and then adopted a strategy that we called thin and wide to take the capabilities that we had in the tool, short of opportunity management, and roll that out to as many people as possible as fast as we could. So we started in Q2 with the commercial selling organization, our CMA division, and then from there continued to build on that, adding in different enterprise selling organizations. We started in July in that regard with a couple of countries in Europe, a few in Asia, Latin America, and a couple of our divisions in the U.S. And that really proved to be incredibly valuable because it wasn't just a pilot of a couple of hundred users. As you can see, we went from, it's hard for me to see here, but we went from 1,600 to 3,800. So it was a sizable next step in the audience, but it also wasn't 7,000 people. So it allowed us to make some mistakes and to tweak and to learn from it. So for those that are in the middle or haven't started an implementation like that, the one lesson learned, and we'll share a bunch of other things with you in this session, but you should do it in a phased approach. You should plan it over time, and you should ramp people in over time so that you can learn and iterate on it. So, taking a step back from this, I guess we were all surprised that we were going to dive into a Salesforce full implementation this year when we started the year. This was not planned. And our account executive was in the back. Brought me to dinner in December of last year, and I said, there's no way you guys are going to get this deal done by the end of January. And I was wrong. And that's why I'm not a salesman. And that's why I just implement these things and not sell them. So it was a surprise to us. But it was also a welcome surprise because we had been getting hammered for the last few years. Carolyn and I and some others in the room were part of the deployment of the prior CRM solution, and like we said earlier, we had got as far as just tracking opportunities. It wasn't what the field wanted. And so all we kept hearing from them was, we got to go with Salesforce, we got to go with Salesforce, we got to go with Salesforce. So it was great news that we were launching into that. But at the same time as we were planning this, we thought, well, this is going to be different, right? This is Salesforce.com. People have been asking this forever. We'll roll this thing out, and people start using it and banging information into it, and everybody's going to be psyched. And the reality is that's not the way it goes. And so although this solution, as Steve said, is the best in the marketplace for our CRM capabilities, it still requires some of the basics around change management that you'd have to do on any kind of major business transformation that you'd embark on. The thing that Salesforce provides is the brand precedes itself. So the conversations that we have with the field as part of this project are completely different than the conversations we had 3-4 years ago. Doors are open to us. People are welcoming us in to talk about what we can do with the solution. There's a lot of input. There's a ton of engagement. We haven't, on any project that we've done, had this level of engagement between the field sales organization, operations, and IT, and our partners collaborating together on doing that. So, in that regard, Salesforce has really helped, as well as being able to go fast. For us to go, on that roadmap that I showed you, for us to go with that first release from really starting in we went live with that first release in May and really got going by the end of March, early April, to turn that type of thing around in an 8-week time frame. For us, we didn't do things like that quickly. So being able to go fast and move through these iterations quickly was a real benefit. But the thing that we want to focus on the rest of this session is the fact that as we went through those first couple of iterations, we didn't see the adoption that we thought we'd see. We didn't see the login rates that we thought we'd see. We didn't see the activity that we thought we'd see. And it was disappointing, but at the same time, we looked at each other and we're like, well, of course. This is a sales organization. No matter how good the tool is, no matter how compelling the idea is, if it's not going to directly impact their pocket, they're not going to act out of the gate. And so you'll see a profile of people where you'll have 20% of the people who will dive in right away because that's what they do. You'll have the people on the other end of the bell curve who will go kicking and screaming no matter what it is. And then you'll have the rest of the people who will wait and see what happens and then follow. And that's what we saw with this. And so what we want to share with you is the lessons learned that we've had over the last few years and culminating in this project on on how we've looked at change management, how we've changed our approach as part of the Salesforce implementation, so that hopefully you can take some things away from what we've learned and embed them into your efforts as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian. And Brian and Carolyn are going to talk about the way we structured the teams and what we did differently to drive change management with this effort as a result of the things that I said up front.
Great. Thanks, Darren.
Brian.
So, I think you guys get the point that this was a very complicated environment. As someone that works for Accenture, this is what we love to do, and it's great to be a part of something like this. What has been a realization for us is that we can take the methodologies and all the things that Accenture brings to the table and apply them to an implementation like Salesforce.com at EMC, and a lot of things are the same. But what we're realizing is that SaaS is making it different, and Salesforce.com is making it very different. Again, the underlying principles are the same, but things happen more quickly. And we, as an organization, are now finding ourselves in a situation that we need to change the way that we think a little bit, which, as Accenture, is a little bit hard to do, and it's hard to kind of move that ship and turn it around. And the prime example is when I look at this adoption curve, and most of you have probably seen this or something very similar to this with any implementation that you do, whether it's CRM or a big ERP. At the end of the day, you're trying to get people up that adoption curve. What's interesting about doing this with Salesforce.com or SaaS in general is that you don't have that flexibility of time. So previously, you could take time to build that awareness. You could get people to understand. You could get some belief, get to that commitment, and ultimately that will drive adoption. And you could do most of that before you actually went live. Now we're finding that we hit this critical valley of despair when we go live because that window is shrinking. So think about all the emails that you get, all the communications that you get when any kind of change is happening in your organization, and how much can you really consume? As an end user, as a salesperson especially, it's different. There are a lot of things being thrown at you. Now we're taking that delivery window from what used to be a year into 2 or 3 months. You just can't get there. And then you go to 7,000 people around the world with 9 different sales organizations and everybody's matrix. There's no way. And so now we're finding ourselves at this critical point that we're not only going live quickly, but now people don't believe yet. So what can we do, and how do we change that approach to make sure that once we go live, we are now actually at more risk of them not adopting if we don't pay attention? And how do we find ourselves getting to the sales community, getting to the end users, and finding a way to engage with the business so that we can drive the adoption up the curve? Because everything is shifting to the left. It's making things happen so much more quickly. And that, I think, was the big realization for us. Like Darren mentioned, we rolled it out. It's the best tool there is. What else do you want? But it's not everything they want. It never will be. And we realize that and we understand that. But how do we refocus our energy to make sure that we are giving EMC the value that they want out of a tool like Salesforce.com? And I think SaaS not only brings challenges, but they also bring good opportunities because it's flexible and we can change things. So as we move into the framework, right, and this is something that Accenture will bring to any big program, there is a framework for how we drive change and drive adoption. And there are a lot of elements that don't change, right? And the fundamental principles behind what we're trying to do don't change. So having the executive sponsorship and leadership, you need that no matter what, right? And that doesn't change with SaaS. Having a good communications plan, making sure that you're talking to the right people and that you're programmatically telling people where we need to go and what we need to do, that's important, and that doesn't change. Again, it happens more quickly, but that doesn't change. What we are finding is that the other elements exist, but now we're thinking about them differently. So we'll start with the top left around performance measurement. So, I think Darren said, if it doesn't impact their pocket, they're not interested. So how do we make it impact their pocket? Or how do we at least explain to them why you're going to be evaluated in the way that you are, and how does that change with SaaS and with Salesforce? And what we did is we said, let's find scheduled KPI targets. And when we say schedule, that means that we found 10 things. We had a very programmatic approach, week by week by week, what you were supposed to do, what you were being measured on, and we could explain that, show them in reports, build dashboards for the managers. Everybody was on the same page. That was really important for us to see the adoption that we wanted to get. And having those standardized measurement tools, which again, with Salesforce, having those dashboards, having a team in place to support that when someone came to us and said, I don't get this, it doesn't make sense to me, we could change it quickly. That is the benefit of having something like Salesforce.com. The business ownership that we've gotten, you know, Darren told us we got openings to doors that we never thought existed before. We established a group of peers, people that knew each other, that spoke together, they had regular sessions together. In the US, as a prime example, we had all of the business managers and productivity managers. They were part of the team because they met 3 times a week anyway. So let's make sure that they understand what's going on. They're part of the team. They're helping us. And we meet with them regularly to make sure that when something's not right, we know about it and we can change it. That was key to making this work. This next piece around technology enablement is probably one of the biggest game changers, just the way that we think about it. We used to almost think about this as app maintenance. And you know, I think a lot of people that have gone through any type of technology deployment know once you're done rolling out, we have an app maintenance team and we make changes and we do stuff. But is it really meaningful to the organization? How much of those enhancements really impact how quickly I can create an activity, or how is this going to help me sell better? How is this going to give me the visibility that I need to actually do my job more efficiently and more quickly? And so we built this concept of process integration, of what are the real processes that the sales guys care about, right? So we all have our high-level processes, and we can build, you know, how to click here and why you have to do this, and what does that really mean, you know. When you're doing a deployment like this, you have to have those base process flows. But until you sit with a salesperson and actually talk to him and understand why he has that spreadsheet that he won't let go of, you don't really know what they're doing. And so we built this idea of if we can get with the business, if we can sit with the sales guys, if we can talk to them, we will actually find new processes that we can make more efficient within Salesforce.com. And now they're more meaningful because now I'm not just doing it because my boss tells me to do it. It's actually saving me a few minutes here and there. It's actually a lot easier for me to do it in Salesforce.com. But again, without the right people in place to figure that out, you just can't win. So that was a huge element, and we'll give you some examples. Carolyn will walk us through how that helped us at EMC. The training and support piece was also kind of an eye-opening experience because the best way is always to do live training. There's no way to refute that. You can't live train 7,000 people. So what do you do? And how much investment do you put into building training that's meaningful? And we all know that we've taken our training. Do you remember it? Do you care? Probably not. I mean, I know. I get the corporate training from Accenture, and it says it takes 30 minutes, and I'm thinking I can do it in 10 because I can click through as quick as I can and you know, take the score, and if I fail, then I'll just take the quiz again to make sure I pass. So thinking about that, then and I wonder how much time or money did Accenture spend to give me that training, and do I even get it? No. And that's just the reality of training. So that's why computer-based training doesn't always make the most impact, but it's scalable and it's efficient and it's an easy way to throw people back to say, did you take the training? Go look at it because there is meaningful information. So we had to have people accountable for that, but we also knew let's not invest a ton of time and money into building training that no one cares about. And we also realized that these are sales guys. So, and no offense, Tom, sitting in the back as the sales guy, but it's hard to keep their attention. So you can't even sit them down for 4 hours. I mean, it's impossible to try to keep them focused. So the thinking was, okay, let's get them the basics. Let's just make sure they know how to log in, which sounds ridiculous, but there are people that still haven't logged in. And they don't know how. And we get emails. Can you change my password? Can you, reset me? I'm locked out. And we're thinking, why are you doing that? Like, what a waste of Carolyn's time to field an email from some guy that can't log in. But that's the reality. So we thought, okay, let's get these computer-based trainings out the door, get them the basics, push some ownership on the productivity and business managers to help field those questions. And then let's focus on post-go live, because that's when things start changing. Once you get them in, they're smart. They figure things out. They realize how to make things more quick. They understand how this is going to make my life easier. And that's where we needed to staff a team that could sit there and understand that. And now we're driving real value, right? And that was kind of the eye-opening experience for us, was that if we just focus on enabling the sales organization, let's not just plug in a tool that we know is the best. Let's actually talk to the sales organization and understand, you know what? Something doesn't work, and that's okay. How else were we supposed to know? We did something in 3 months for 7,000 users. We're not going to get it perfect. That's okay. And with SaaS, you now have the ability to actually change things quickly. And that, again, goes back to some of that process integration idea. But at the end of the day, having that post-go-live support and having a team that's ready to understand and to sit with the business is crucial. And now we've shifted some value from that upfront training that is kind of your standard way that you do change management. We just kind of shifted that to after go live. So now I'll hand it over to Carolyn, who's going to take you through some examples of how we did this, specifically at EMC.
Thank you. Okay, so at EMC we decided we were going to focus in 3 primary areas. The first is rapid adoption. The second is what we call process integration, and the third is what we call recurring business engagement. So rapid adoption is really about getting the users to focus on the very basic functionality as quick as possible. And giving them the tools and the mechanisms to focus on whatever that particular relevant information is at a point in time. It's like when you roll out a tool, the tool can do this much. Do you want them and expect them to do this much on day one? No, you got to focus them. And I'll show you in just a few minutes about our adoption targets, which are our performance metrics, and how we focus them on a week-by-week basis to help them understand what they should and should not be paying attention to at any point in time. We had a lot of mechanisms that we used to drive rapid adoption, but the common theme throughout all of them was that we provided frequent but short, call it 30-minute, interactions with them to help them understand what to pay attention to at a particular point in time. For process integration, this ended up being really the linchpin for as much success as we had with our enablement approach. Process integration, as Brian alluded to, is about enabling manual processes that these guys have manual processes. They're working offline. Excel is everybody's best friend in the field. It was, how do we take those manual processes and move them into the solution in a way that's going to deliver meaningful and recurring value for them? It could also take the form of doing just even basic configuration, something very simple that would have a huge impact on even just the usability for your basic user. So what we did here is we carved out capacity, different from the application maintenance team, different from the development team, because as Darren, when he showed you that timeline, we were, thank you, I'm not done. We were moving very quickly, and we were moving, lovely, moving very quickly, and we needed to make sure that we had resources focused on continuing to deliver some very major functionality at very specific points in time. We were on an aggressive timeline. We carved out resources specifically to be focused on the enablement team that would be all about understanding what are these processes that we can now integrate into the solution, what are these simple configurations that we can make to help improve usability, and they could make those changes independent of what was happening in the rest of the program. So that autonomy proved to be really beneficial, because what we showed was we heard what you said, we're listening, and we can deliver the value right back to you very quickly. And from a user perspective, having that perception that we heard them and that we delivered something back is crucial to deliver this type of application. The third is what we call recurring business engagement, and this is really about having frequent, two-way, open communication with the users in the field. The whole intent of recurring business engagement is to make sure that you are in touch consistently with what is happening in the field. If you go away, they're not going to drive themselves. You have to be there. You have to, it gets uncomfortable sometimes, right? But once you get over that, it's how do you, the conversations that you're having are what's working well and what's working less well. And it's the results of those conversations, the outputs of those conversations that become an input into rapid adoption content as well as process integration priorities. So the whole thing ties together, but it is really about being able to focus in these three areas. And let me just take you through how we structured our team to allow us to be able to do this. So we have management layer between Brian and myself. But what we did was we had individuals that were assigned to each of our major geographies. And think of them as they are the face of the program or the face of Salesforce out to the users. They're the people that are driving the recurring business engagement. They're the ones that are having the conversations with the people in the field saying what's going well and what's going less well. The results of those conversations go back to what we have as a cross-geographic team that supports each of those geo leads that are taking in the inputs for process integration, as well as a lot that happens around reporting and dashboards. The more you rely on reporting and dashboards as a communication mechanism for the field, teach them to be able to look at their dashboards, teach them to be able to use their reports. It's a way to help them be very self-sufficient. But it's a journey to get there, right? Because they don't always know what they want out of the gate. And I think it's fair to say that we should plan, or you should plan in your implementations to make sure that you have the right resources there to help move the reporting and dashboard capabilities or the enhancements that need to be made, move them along as fairly quickly as possible. So we had this team of about 7 onshore and about 5 offshore resources supporting this type of engagement with the field. This is a great slide. If any of you can memorize this right now, it would be a good time. These are our adoption targets. So as Brian alluded to earlier, this became the Bible for us. There's a couple of things that I want to call out about these targets. First is that they were created globally. Everybody around the globe had the same expectations being set for use of the solution at the same point in time, right? That's invaluable. We also had senior level buy-in to these metrics, and in many of the regions, people who were helped be responsible for managing the deployment in those regions were actually bonused on meeting those targets. So to be able to get to that level to me, that's a game changer when people who are actually being bonused to be able to drive this level of adoption. So those are the first 3 things I want to call out. The next thing I want to call out is that the metrics are focused on the basics. It starts from basic, here's how I log in, to more advanced yet still basic functionality around creating activities. Very basic. What we also did was make sure that rather than give them a target for the end of the quarter, because we're very quarterly focused, it was let's show them the path to get there along the way. So we carved out what we thought were the most appropriate metrics on a weekly basis. We came up with this format or this path based on what we've learned from some of our previous deployments where the users who followed this path seemed to get the most value from the solution more quickly than the others. So we created this, there's the timing, and we also went a step further to define how much time did we think it was going to take someone in the field to achieve one of those targets on a week-by-week basis. It gives them some context for how do they manage how should they manage their week, right? If I had a number up there that said it was going to take 40 hours, I would suspect that I'm not going to get very much from that field rep, if that's the expectation I'm setting, I would also rethink what my performance or my adoption target should be if we're setting those kind of expectations. So the estimated time is very reasonable. And it helps eliminate some of the noise that you hear in the field of, I don't have enough time. When management sees this and someone from the field says, I don't have enough time, it's like, you don't have an hour to invest in this solution that we just invested because you've been asking for it for 3 years. It's a hard argument. So I think that having adoption targets like this really do set expectations very well for the field globally, not just about what they should be doing, but how long it should take and when. And these are the types of metrics that they start every conversation that we have with the field. We take these metrics, and it tells us how people are doing and where people are doing well and where people are doing less well. I want to just share with you some results about driving, specific to driving rapid adoption. So with our enablement approach, which we've just spent a few minutes going through, just take a look at this chart here. Before we put this enablement approach in place, it took us about 3 weeks to achieve what we considered a healthy login rate, which was about 85%. With this new enablement approach, which is focused on the basics, we could achieve that rate in 3 days. And it wasn't because we had done so well with our deployment and we only had a few users left. With the 21-day rate, it was about a third of the users. The other 2/3 of the users were coming on board in 3 days. And it's because if you go back to this adoption target, we carved out week 1 is all about logging in. Just log in. It seems so simple, but unbelievable how challenging that can actually be. The second is around average intelligence collected. So we were measuring average intelligence on a per user basis. Wanted to get really a good idea of how are the individual users doing. And we saw almost a 30% increase by using this approach in the amount of intelligence collected. When I talk about intelligence, I'm talking about activities, tasks, and contacts. So it's fairly compelling that just a simple approach of focusing people on the basics at a very short intervals of time give them the focus to be able to see this kind of improvement overall for your deployments. The next is on process integration. I actually have 2 good stories here, and I'll make them quick. The first is around lead creation. So part of our initial deployment was around contact account and lead management. And we didn't see a whole lot of uptick in the use of the lead management capabilities, particularly from our enterprise organization, who felt like lead management is really about a higher volume, lower touch model. We're a high touch, lower volume model. We know our customers. Why would we ever want to deal with leads? And to even take it a step further, you spend so much time talking about leads. Why is the solution so much focused on our commercial and low-end business? So, that was the perception, good, bad, or indifferent. Then they came to us and said, hey, we want to do a campaign for a new product. And we want to get an understanding of how we can do that within Salesforce. We want to create the campaign, we want to drive the campaign, and we want to track the campaign. Something that they had done before, but they had done it in Excel historically, like everybody else was. We said, great. We're going to use the lead object to do that. Oh, no, leads aren't for us. Oh, this would be good. So we took the requirements. The process integration team worked with the field to understand what their requirements were. And all we did was show them how to use the lead object to create a lead, which is your target accounts, and how you can track that through the life cycle. And the reporting behind it, obviously we helped them out with that, but the reporting behind it was exactly what they would want to get today, but now it's in the solution whenever they want it. And now as a result, they got it, they saw the value, 97% growth in just use of the lead object, which them getting their heads around what's possible made now anytime they talk about wanting to do campaigns to track how they're doing, they now know where to go and they now know how to do it. Right? So second good example is another division that we had that we were struggling with adoption initially. And through conversation, it became very clear that they have this activity tracker. And the activity tracker was something that was very ingrained in their business, all the way up through the management chain. Religiously, it was something that was reviewed on a weekly basis, and everybody in the field was accountable for having their work done at a particular point in time, because this is when we were going to review our activities. Salesforce comes out, and there's activity tracking. And we weren't seeing very much of the activity tracking. So initially we're thinking, well, why? This could replace your activity tracker. But it didn't replace it. So what the field felt was, I'm not going to put my stuff in Salesforce because my management is still asking me to do it over here, and now it's duplicating my effort. So for something that you're trying to pitch as a productivity gain, it essentially just, spun on its head. So we were able to get the activity, once we were able to get the activity tracker, something simple was something that they already were doing. It's a process that's ingrained. We were able to incorporate it into the solution. I mean, the uptick in the growth for activities and contacts is phenomenal. So now it's no longer tracked offline, and it was something that was meaningful for this organization. It was something that was real for them, and we just automated it. It's simple. Once you have the awareness of what are those things out there that we can automate, and that's sort of the challenge is how do you get all that information, and when's a good time to do that automation? So as a result of some of the good successes that we've had with our enablement and our deployment with Salesforce, we as an organization have taken some of these learnings, and we've incorporated them into our overall change management methodology at EMC. And I just, over the next 2 slides, just want to talk about some key takeaways and some things that I think are important to share for all of you who are either are in the middle, starting, or considering going on a journey like this. The first is to plan for a 2-quarter change management process. We at EMC, we do a lot of large programs, and what we've typically done is we deploy, we hang around for the quarter, we think they're stable, and then we move on. And we move on simply because the next thing is up, and we don't have the capacity or the resources to stay longer. In this new model, we're flipping that around, and we're planning up front as part of the budget and timing process that we're going to stick around for 2 quarters, with the first quarter focused on basic adoption, right? You have to make sure that these guys are focused on the basics of the solution. And then the second quarter is really about more advanced use and optimizing the existing capabilities that are out there. So huge takeaway for us as we continue to do our planning for 2010. The next is and this is where we've actually done a good job, but we took it to a whole nother level on this program, is the champions that are out there in the field that are really an extension of your program team. If money wasn't an issue, you could have a 100-person team driving this thing in no time. But the reality is, at least for us, and I'm thinking for most of you, that's not going to be the case, and that you really need to think about who are the right people out there in the regions and your divisions who would be an extension of your team, like the next ring of people, that you have to make sure that they're educated so that they can further educate the next ring of people, because there's only going to be a few of you, and to get out to the masses is unreasonable. You're going to go away even after 2 quarters, but they need to be able to continue to maintain and progress in the solution, and you spend the time here educating those users. It doesn't have to be the actual field users, it's the management, it's operations types folks to help extend your reach and make it happen more quickly. The adoption metrics, making them visible. We show them every 2 weeks. We show them we have business lead meetings. We show them every 2 weeks. Here's how you're doing. We compare people. You're in the top 2. You're in the bottom 3. Congratulations, you hit your target. What's going on over here? Because they get a little competitive with each other. So we played that up, and making sure that the executives see these exact metrics, because you need the executives showing that they're looking, they're paying attention. If they're not there and they're not present, no matter how many of these things that you are able to do, you're still going to struggle, because if it's not real for them, it's not going to be real for the field users. Right? To Brian's point, even though Darren, if they asked me to take training, I would totally do it. I wouldn't skip through it. And just a few other ones about, that don't underestimate the time it takes not only to manage the change effort, but to support it post-go live. So this is where the 2 quarters come in. I think it's a really good gauge There'll clearly be some variation depending on the size of your organization and how much change you're looking to take on at one time. But I think using that as a gauge will set you up for at least healthy discussions on what your team needs to look like to help manage that change. The last is around, I'm just going to skip to the bottom one, around process integration. So we talked a little bit about already today about how powerful that can be. I like the way this is said, it's a catalyst for organic adoption. It really is a way to make sure that you continue to move forward quickly in a meaningful way for the field, and it has a tremendous amount of value to getting the field's head around how important this can be and how quickly it follows the SaaS model. We can do things quickly. You have a team like this that can turn things around quickly. You know, you're living and breathing the words. So on that note, I'm going to open it up for questions. Yes.
We've been using Salesforce for 4 years, and user adoption is our biggest problem. And I'm just wondering, with Salesforce releasing at least 3 releases a year and all the new stuff that they have, how do you do ongoing training and ongoing user adoption with new programs or products that they release?
You want to field that
Sure.
one?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because, again, just because it's the latest and greatest doesn't mean that the field is ready to consume it. So we're very selective about what are the priorities. Having the gauge with the business, that recurring business engagement, helps us understand if a new feature is going to be helpful or not. So that, definitely having that prioritization discussion with the business is important. Now, the mechanisms to release those. We do like little short video clips, 2-3 minutes long, to show people how you create a lead. Right? That was a big thing. So we said, let's build a quick video for 2-3 minutes, show people how to do it. You can only get it if you're in Salesforce, because there's the link to access it within Salesforce. And then having communications that are short and concise. So we do every 2 weeks a "Did you know?", which is, it's got the brand, which is really important. That any communication that comes from our program has a banner that has, EMC and Salesforce.com, and it's a Salesforce.com email. And it's 3 or 4 bullets of, did you know that you can access training to create a lead with a link that takes you right to that video? And then you have to log in and go through that. So those are some key ways to help drive that change. And again, prioritizing is important, but having the right people in place. If we didn't have the team that we had, we couldn't create the video to show people how to do what they need to do. So, to Carolyn's point, having that structured support 1 or 2 quarters after you go live is crucial. Yeah, so we had videos that were not only just the training, the computer-based training of, and they were modular, which was important for us because we know you don't have enough time to sit through 3 hours of training. So we did, 5 or 6 different modules. And then we also had videos from our executive sponsors. So the head of sales for your theater was telling you why this was important. And that was like a 5-minute video at most. And those are the things that resonate. If all of a sudden my boss is telling me this is important, and I'll pay attention.
Just so everyone can hear the mix of videos that.
We mix the videos on. Yeah. Am I on? Yeah. Am I on now? Yeah. The recorded training modules that we had, it was, just to also backtrack on that, it was focused very much on the basics. It wasn't, we made sure we purposely did not make it very process-focused because the processes varied so much from division to division, region to region, and then we would have spent all our time dealing with training modules, which Brian had already said. I mean, there's really no guarantee that the consumers are actually consuming that information. So that's first on the training modules. When it comes to the mix of video, from an executive video, there's one, right? We also would create little training clips, like 30 seconds, that we would record somebody doing something in the application so that it's someone can go, it's like a supplemental way to give somebody help and training rather than have them read a document. If they can just see how it works, that became something that people seem to really appreciate. It's like if they could see it, then they knew exactly what they needed to do and they were done. They didn't have to read a document and then go figure out what does that mean in the system. Does that make sense?
And I think he was asking about whether or not we had hands-on training as well, and there was virtually none, right?
None.
So it was all remote, either computer-based training or other
Right.
forums.
It was the other forms, the recurring business, or the rapid adoption. We had what we called either manager forums or quick start forums. We had sessions that were set up with the users a couple of times a week, depending on what we were doing, that were anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Everybody got on the phone. We're gonna walk you through the application for the things that you need to be paying attention to now based on the way our adoption targets were laying out. Right? So we were out there. We were communicating with them. If they showed up, it worked. If they didn't show up, that could clearly be a challenge. That's where your extended team comes in. You need those additional arms to start following up with those people who seem to be falling behind. Did I answer your question? Okay. Yes.
You mentioned about how you traded off some of the training expense off to one process integration or post-live stuff. Would you recommend also shifting maybe some of the upfront requirement design work also to the post-live, or would you keep that?
Yeah, I think that is something we inherently did with this, is that because the time was compressed, we spent less times on requirement definition and design than we would in a normal model. So by default, it became a situation that we dealt with after go live. So we wanted to try to get the basics in and make sure we nailed that, but then iterate on it over time, but through this phased approach. So I think by default, we did push some of that capacity to later in the cycle.
Did you actually build a return on investment model at the inception of this? And if you did build it, how are you tracking to it? And how important was that in actually getting the organization to do it versus knowing that you had a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and your current user base was just broken?
Yeah.
So this was a better system versus going up to Joe Tucci and saying, here's the ROI on this, how much money we're going to make, and then going back and saying, here's how we execute.
To be frank, we have a pretty rigorous process around that, building business cases and driving ROI. For this one, it kind of got fast-tracked. As I mentioned earlier, it was more of a strategic bet. It was a platform bet, and we had to drive certain metrics to drive productivity. And so we're building that in now, and we've kind of built it as we're going, as opposed to doing it up front. It was just a little bit different on this because there was a burning platform for this that didn't need anybody. Nobody needed to see what percentage of people's time we were going to save and what that translates to into operating costs. It was, no, we got to go do this. So it was a little bit different, but we do that on a regular basis. And so what we'll be doing going into next year is trying to quantify that, retrospectively to say, well, this is what we are achieving, because we need to keep that reinforcement, because we're not expecting that we're going to nail this next quarter and the quarter after, that this is going to be an ongoing thing, and we're going to need that type of analysis to keep the momentum going at an executive level.
I think just to add to that point that I think is important for everyone to understand is that the fact that you're getting people in there and focusing on that for the next 2 quarters is key to making the data meaningful and reliable. When we first did this for Inside Sales a year ago, it took me 2 months to get people to actually believe the metrics that we were showing them, because they just assumed that it wasn't right. So driving this adoption gets the data in there, and now that conversation of here's what it's telling me, and it is real, is going to be really impactful. So driving that adoption will get you in an enterprise organization that is as large as EMC. That's a challenge.
I'm interested in how large your resource base is going to open to support this kind of market. Because compared to us, 1,600 is quite a large amount of people, even from a phased approach and from a fifth phase. But what kind of resource base do you have? How many people would you support on a code base?
So, meaning how big was our enablement team?
Yeah.
Our enablement team was about 7 onshore resources and about 5 offshore resources. so to support 7,000 people.
There was not program oriented that you could
Right, so
Nope, nope.
yeah, so the entire program
Yep.
is probably, in
Like-
all internal and external mix, you're looking at about 50 people.
That's right.
Around development, configuration,
Yep.
process work, project management, program management, training. It's a large-scale effort.
Yep.
This enablement team is,
Small.
25% of the total team.
And is it enough?
It's not enough. I'd like more people, please.
Carolyn always says, if I knew
If
what I knew, she would have at least doubled it.
I would have planned this. Well, we know what we know now, so we plan it. We're going to plan it differently going forward.
how many would you suggest? I mean, Bronco is never enough.
For a 7,000-person deployment that we had, in a very highly matrix, complex environment, I would at least double that team.
Double the enablement.
The
side.
enablement
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rest of the team, it was good. We were able to crank. Yep. Yes.
This falls down a little bit from some of the, question about the following metrics and the adoption and so on. We've been using Salesforce, well, it's our first full year, ending this year, and I can see the adoption increasing and people using it more rigorously and so on. But I think a lot of them do it begrudgingly. Well, I have to do it now because it's part of my job.
Yep.
And it's not, they don't feel like they're getting a lot of benefit out of it
Yep.
necessarily. And so I wonder, is within your implementation here, are you doing field-based surveys to see, do you like using Salesforce? Is it useful for you?
We
Has
didn't-
that been part of what you've done? And if so,
Yeah.
what have you found?
So we are not doing surveys. It's, the evidence that we have is more anecdotal than that, and it's very similar to what you've just shared. This is a change for people, and they're going to fight it as much as they can. I think the reality of, I think that to Darren's point, about 20% of the users are psyched because this is what they've been waiting for, and they naturally are attracted to technologies like this. And then you have 20% of the users that, I don't know, they're going to go kicking and screaming. They might leave the organization before they log in. And then there's a group of people in between that they'll do it if someone tells them they need to do it. Begrudgingly, of course, but they'll eventually get there. So I think the reality is when you're dealing with something, a deployment like this, I think that it's fair to be honest that it can be very much stick more than carrot out of the gate. And that has to be okay.
But I think the thing, and the team mentioned it earlier, that we're going to keep doing, because I think it's very effective, is when we can get those initial people, reps or managers, who can articulate in their own words for their peers on what they're doing differently. It's totally different than a program team or some central group that's packaging this type of material. So Carolyn's tried to pull district managers on the calls and pulled reps onto these calls. That's to us the biggest thing that's going to keep the momentum going is them putting it in their own language on why it matters.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll hang around for a little bit after this, as well as we'll be in the booth, and members of the enablement team will be there as well on the Accenture booth across the hall.
Yours is a global implementation, right? So did you implement one standard process across the platform, or was it like a different processes for different regions and different teams? And if you implemented one standard process, how did you deal with the adoption of the groups who had different processes, and you're kind of forcing them to use a different process? How did you deal with the adoption?
Go ahead.
It was standardization wherever possible, because that was one of the challenges we had in our organization, is people were doing things very differently, and it was hard to know how we were doing as an organization because everyone sort of had a different story. So we use this as an opportunity to do process improvement as opposed to just take a technology and lay it over existing processes, which historically you're just not going to be successful with that kind of deployment. So lots of process change for some groups, less for others. But it wasn't, I think your question was, like, how did we deal with the groups that were changing? I mean, Brian,
But we do
there was
use-
very
I mean-
little.
Did you feel like lots of resistance from those groups for the change, or
Some, but the reality is that in an application like this, you're able to set a standard process with regional variation, right? So it's not, there has to be regional variation because not everybody is the same. So as long as you set a process, like even our lead management process that said leads are going to flow through the system in this way, that's okay. Everybody's working towards that, so a lead in a certain status means the same thing to everybody. That's okay. How it gets into that status and the mechanism can vary from region to region, and you give them that kind of flexibility, and it helps soften the blow. Do you agree with that?
No, and just the education alone of really understanding how can I use the lead, right? So it's a different conversation. It's not that you have to use it this way. It's how can you use it to actually track your pipeline in Salesforce, which the guys that get it, they're all over it. They love it. The ones that don't are the ones that haven't listened to the training or didn't join the calls. And we'll get to them, but it just takes a lot of time.
So for those fans of 24 on Fox, we are over time. I'm surprised it didn't beep when we went over, but thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Like I said, we'll be here, and if you don't have time and you got to run somewhere else right now, we'll be in the Accenture booth as well throughout today and tomorrow.
Great job.